So a very good afternoon to you all joining us here for another Lunch and Learn PPMA session. This is our final session of July. We've been packed full of brilliant programs. All of our previous programs from July are available on our website, so I urge you to take a look at that for some great content. And we're going to finalize July, bring it to a crescendo with an amazing session that we've got lined up, thanks to the support of our platinum sponsor Matrix and the brilliant Chris Grimes. Chris, thank you so much for arranging this, and it's great to see you again today. And I'm not going to say anything further. I'm just going to hand you over to Chris, who's going to introduce you to the fantastic panel that he's got lined up. And so enjoy this discussion around social value. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks, Lethan. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us today. Today we wanted to talk about social value and obviously how HR can get involved with helping deliver social value as well. Social value for Matrix has been a really important sort of development for us for the last 4 years, where we've tried to sort of really kind of up our game, which has seen Siobhan Goss join the team at Matrix as our regeneration manager. Siobhan is responsible for sort of delivering social value outcomes alongside our customers, alongside our partners. She's been working in partnership with our clients and suppliers to help improve the lives and outcomes of residents and people in the community. So Siobhan is going to be one of the panel today. Joining Siobhan, we've got the familiar face of Karen Grave. Obviously, I'm sure you're all aware of who Karen Grave is. Karen's the president of the PPMA, so hopefully we can get a bit of a HR perspective from Karen. Moira Skinner will also join us on the panel. Moira is the Managing Director of 3D Change and ProcureCo. Moira's worked across both the public and private sector during her career and is passionate about helping companies to access social housing and public sector procurement opportunities and driving social value and social impact into her work. So thanks for joining us today, Moira. And then Garry Dursley is the Economic Development Officer at Redbridge, London Borough of Redbridge. So Garry has worked sort of with Siobhan in partnership with a number of projects. If anyone's got any questions outside of the questions we've got lined up on the panel today, feel free to include them in the chat function, and Tom from Matrix will keep an eye on those and prompt me to sort of sum them up at the end. So without further ado, without me whittling on, should we start talking about some people who actually got something useful to say? So I guess the first question for today then, so really hopefully a really easy question to start with. What is social value and why is it important? If I fire that question first of all to Siobhan.
Sure. So social value, the official definition is any economic, social and environmental impact that an organisation makes while they're working with their clients. But for us at Matrix, it's more about how we can use our skills and resources to give back to the communities that the clients work with.
Thanks, Siobhan. And Moira, why do you think social value is so important to our customers?
I mean, we work with housing associations across the board and local authorities, and what we've increasingly seen is the shift from in 2012 when the Social Value Act came into being. Local authorities, housing associations, there's far more emphasis. There are clearly a lot of cuts going on in that sector, and they have always had that ethos of working with communities and putting something back into communities. And I feel that the Social Value Act in 2012 strengthened that even more so. So it's there, it's always been there, whereas private sector tends to be more profit driven, public sector is far more social value driven, I would say, and cost cutting.
Thanks, Maura. Karen, probably a bit of an unfair sort of slant on this question, but I'll throw it towards you. Sort of, how do you think sort of social value and its importance links into what HR do, and how can HR sort of push social value up the agenda, I guess?
I think it's actually, it's thinking, Chris, about social value as a particular topic in its own right. I mean, adding on to what Siobhan and Moira has said, a really helpful way to think about public service organisations is that they are social purpose organisations. And if you're thinking about being purposeful, then you are all about adding value. And from the perspective of HR and OD, one of our core reasons to be it is how do we equip our workforce to be able to deliver the best possible services we can to our broader communities. Now, we don't articulate that as social value, but it clearly is social value. So I think it is really helpful to think about some of the language we use as a profession in working with our colleagues, because we need to understand what social value means to our organisations so that we can help support and sustain our workforce. So that's the perspective I take on it anyway.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think lots of companies don't even realise that they are doing social value.
Absolutely.
So I think recognising it and making the terminology a bit more widespread would definitely have a benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Siobhan, I think one of the things, sorry, Chris, I know we're probably going out of order, but thinking about and talking about this helps us deal with some of the issues around measurement. So historically, you know, everybody's trying to get quantitative numbers out of public services. And it's important that we do that in some areas, but actually it's difficult on some of these, you know, non-quantifiable measures to really articulate what good measures are. So the way we talk about things is really important for all sorts of reasons.
And please don't apologise, Karen. It's good to have a lively debate. Me talking, I'd rather my input be as limited as possible. You guys are.
Bless you.
Logged on to see. So in terms of the delivery of, sort of social value and delivering sort of social purpose and that type of stuff, obviously how does the panel feel that's changed, obviously particularly given the world we're living in now is very different to the world we lived in January 2020. It's, you know, obviously lockdown, we've been in lockdown, we've come out of lockdown, we're in a new normal, we're potentially going back, we've got actually going back into lockdown again. See Greater Manchester today talking about sort of lockdown and things like that. So how's the delivery of these sort of things changed? Garry, do you want to sort of talk about kind of what Redbridge have been doing in terms of and how that's been impacted by this world we're living in?
Yeah, well, I'm losing you slightly, but I'll endeavour to carry on. So kind of prior to the lockdown, worked quite closely with Siobhan to kind of host a number of kind of workshops, employability workshops. They included insurance. They were kind of sort of well attended, and the sessions went particularly well. Obviously, we had like the whole situation with the pandemic kind of hit us. Since then, we've kind of moved to a remote model, whereby Matrix have delivered kind of more kind of workshops geared to kind of the digital kind of side of things. So how to effectively apply for work and network on LinkedIn, how to handle remote interviews, so you know, on Skype and Teams and telephone interviews, and how to kind of effectively job search and the whole job market online, and how that's kind of how that's changed as well. So they've been really flexible in terms of what we're delivering, and actually a real kind of, especially now, they've been a real benefit to the Redbridge residents who have kind of really benefited from like the workshops. The feedback's been really positive. So yeah, and it's been real kind of, obviously the push towards the more digital and remote kind of way of doing things. So it's been really positive in that respect, I think.
Siobhan, sorry, Karen, did you have a question?
Sorry, just I was really interested to hear about what Garry was talking about there, because I think what COVID's done is to make really immediate some of the day-to-day challenges many of our public service organisations are dealing with day in and day out, with very little fanfare. But I also think that the social value we are actually talking about in this context is for many people it's been existential, hasn't it? Yeah, it's been about their life. So if you think about track, trace, test, all of the rest of it, and yes, there are all sorts of issues with it, those sorts of services that we've seen some of our workforce be involved in have had life or death impact. And that's absolutely extraordinary, and it's affected all of our workforce. So it's not, it's not always been people's first job. But if I give you an example of one of our board members has been the humanitarian hub lead for Tameside. And what that experience has done for Tracy is given her a completely different perspective of how the workforce is interacting with residents on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And the impact that's had on her personally has been really, really profound. It's quite extraordinary how it's impacted us all.
Yeah, I think it's just magnified during this sort of period, hasn't it, Karen, in terms of, obviously you see sort of a lot of London boroughs and a lot of other councils across the country sort of getting involved in terms of things like food banks and delivery. Absolutely. And I suspect, Moira and Siobhan, you'll probably see this, but one of our recognitions now is that the proportion of people that we are helping, particularly through local public services, is much larger than it was at the beginning of the year. And that's a hell of a challenge in and of its own right.
Yeah, but if we look in terms of, if I can say it, positives, the ability to run these things from Microsoft Teams and Zoom does mean that we're able to reach a much larger audience, particularly some of the work I've been doing with young people. You can't get young people for love nor money to get all in the same room together, but they're more than happy to sign on to a Zoom call and learn about how to do an interview or how to improve their CV. So some of this is stuff that we'll take forward into a non-COVID situation, and we'll definitely still run on these online workshops because it's really accessible.
I think we've actually also found that a lot of the online stuff will extend, and that's not just us as an organisation within 3D Change or ProcureCo. We've been dealing with the social housing sector, and they are very, very much moving to that space. We were talking yesterday about this, is the technology aspect of things now, whereas previously we would have needed techie people to deliver techie sort of solutions. But now the technical solutions here, anyone can operate. I've got project managers dealing with, and it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And coming back to your point about the social value and how that has changed within this COVID situation, my conversations for the whole of this week have been around social housing, just managing and keeping things together so that things keep going, so that their residents are safe and secure. And it is about the PPE, it is about those solutions in terms of procurement. What can we do to help maintain things? And they're trying to get things to a level whereby it's back to a sort of some semblance of normality, but it's going to take a while, I think. So they're trying to catch up.
Yeah, Yeah, sorry, Chris. Moira, it's a really fascinating point, isn't it? Because I really resonate with what you've said about technology and Siobhan, the workshops you've been talking about younger people. So there's no question that how we have viewed accessibility, so the barriers that we've had a lot in our organisations about we can't do this, there's a policy about that and all the rest of it. It's amazing what actually disappears in a crisis, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But it's also really interesting, I think, that, Chris, you touched on it earlier about, we talk about the new normal. Nobody's got the first clear clue about what the new normal is. So if they're telling you that, actually what we're really talking about from a workforce perspective is how can we get back to work safely? So a real reflection for me is it's great to do these sessions online, but also it's really exhausting. So some of the workforce challenges we've got, and actually, we can't think about supporting our workforces to be able to do all of this effectively. It's also, how do you help our citizens? I hate using that term, it's so impersonal, isn't it? How do we help all of us be able to access those in ways that are also very different? And that's not something we thought about having to do either. And I agree with Moira, this is going to go on for a long time. Yeah. So what we've seen this morning is just the start of, we are not in winter pressures yet. So we are going to see a hell of a lot more of this.
Yeah.
I also think as well, the whole online thing, and I fully agree, but in terms of like the residents we work with, there are people like, not everyone owns a smartphone or a laptop or has the IT skills. So I think it's really important that while this whole thing is kind of, the online offer is brilliant, and you can kind of gain access to all these opportunities, I think it's vital that we don't forget, and we're quite flexible, and we don't lose sight of the challenges that could be ahead in terms of the people that can't access these things.
Yeah. I agree, Gary. It sounds like the focus, because the next question is around how's the focus of social value activities and offerings changed, and it sounds like it's changed, that the answer is quite simply to more digital, but I guess maybe a more pertinent question would be around kind of how do we ensure we don't leave people behind in this sort of digital way, in terms of people who maybe don't have English as a first language, who are maybe not overly good to go on a Zoom call, or perhaps people of an older, not to be stereotypical, and I'll probably have my wrist slapped here, but people of an older generation who maybe then again don't have that comfort that to go on a Zoom call or a digital, and how can we ensure that it's Siobhan has talked about in terms of the digital aspect, getting younger people involved is great, but how can we ensure that focus is still on in society?
Share, if you'll have me.
Yeah, go on, Siobhan.
So a couple of the councils that we're working with have done a big drive recently for donations of old IT equipment. So they've reached out to us, and we've reached out to some of our suppliers. Most companies that we know of have got an old PC somewhere, at least one. So it's about thinking that social value isn't just these practical things. It's not just the social stuff, it's the economic stuff. Give the people what they need. If we need to hand out computers and laptops for people to access these workshops, then that's the sort of thing that we should be doing. And it's very easy, even for small companies or large companies, doesn't really matter, who don't feel they've got the resources to add the social element. There's not very many who couldn't donate a laptop toward the end of it.
I think it's what we've learned, Siobhan, is what we've learned from Matrix is, to your point about small companies and big companies, it doesn't really matter about the size. It's kind of everyone can make a small contribution, no matter how big or small a contribution, it all adds up. And that's what we've really tried to do with our sort of social value sort of plan and sort of strategy, is to kind of really kind of tie in our suppliers into the equation and bring our people, our recruitment agencies that we deal with, us still deliver sort of some outputs ourselves, but to really kind of try and view it as a bit of a triangle. So I think that's a really good. I completely cut you off. So
I think also that there may be, I know many of the social housing providers that we work with, they may have the equipment, they're not actually connected as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, Gary, whether you find that within Redbridge, that there is a definite digital divide in terms of fibre optics and in terms of the whole of that connectivity thing. So even if they actually have the equipment, it's a challenge. And I think many of the housing associations at the moment are looking to put that or break that divide, if you like, in terms of that connectivity. I think that is a big issue actually within social housing.
I agree. Moira, just on the back of that, the two things I've written down is, so one's policy, which is partly what Moira's touched on there, and there's also the structural issues, which Gary and Siobhan have spoken to. So policy is not always seen as very sexy, but you think about what the government did in the early days. So I'm not, let's not get into the debate about whether we like this government or not like this government, but if you look at the very early intervention around homelessness, and actually absolutely putting money in to get people into hotels and off the street, because it was absolutely, utterly dangerous for them to be out in the open and not be cared for. Now, that is a direct example of a policy having a very direct effect quickly. All sorts of issues about the extent to which it's going to be extended and all of the rest of it, but policy, good policy, implemented quickly, effectively, delivers, and it delivers bigly. The second thing is around sort of the structural issues and thinking slightly differently. So Siobhan's example about old kit, I think, is incredible. Recognising Moira's point about infrastructure, again, theoretically, that's a massive policy issue that will both change lives but also cause us all to complain about all of the digging up of the roads that we're going to see. But there's something also really important about, let's look at where we are using tech for other things in other parts of public service that actually we could extend. So my auntie has a heart condition, and in Liverpool her local NHS has given her an iPad, and what she does is she logs on so that, you know, they can do readings and all of the rest of it to keep her health updated. That's absolutely brilliant, but that's a fantastic piece of kit that could be used to do other things. It could be used to order medicine, it could be used to order you know, I need a food parcel or whatever it is. So actually for social value, really, I think, to be effective, we have to think about this through the lens of whole system thinking as well, and we are definitely not there, and we're in the early days, but I think it could help if we broaden our outlook on that.
Absolutely. Have a more joined up approach across local gov, central gov and the health. Absolutely. And we see why that's necessary, Chris, with the absolute fiasco, and I don't mind being quoted on that, with contact, trace and test. You know, it's taken months actually for central government to realise that there's a bloody local government workforce out there who actually do understand who their local residents are, and isn't that a bloody good idea? Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the next question, so we've flowed quite well down to question 4 now, and some of the stuff we might be repeating and stuff, so if we are, then just tell me to move on and I'll answer questions. But so how have we supported residents stroke learners sort of during lockdown, Siobhan? How
Yeah, so this was aimed at our guy from Westminster Adult Education Service, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but it meant that this lockdown meant that we could access more learners. As I was saying earlier, sometimes the technology thing is on our side and it's good news, whereas previously I'd go into classrooms, but more people can log on. So we've just supported them by giving them the tools they need to find good work online. Obviously, easier said than done. There has to be the jobs out there, but at least we're providing people with the tools to sort their CV out and practice those interviews, because all those soft skills are things that every generation is now going to need, particularly those who maybe didn't use it originally. People who previously would have gone into a shop with their CV in their hand have to now sort of rethink how they're going to look for work. So those are the sort of challenges that we've been trying to help people overcome.
Thanks, Siobhan. And Garry, is there anything specifically that you've been doing outside what you've already said?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Garry.
If I had £1 for every time I heard you're on mute, Garry.
Garry, that is the new normal, isn't it?
It is. Thanks for that. No, I mean, we're kind of working with other kind of partners as well, just to kind of look at the whole remote kind of learning and offer, as well as that, kind of just one eye on the future and one eye on the news and seeing how kind of the whole thing develops, really, because there is a big thing to say about kind of face-to-face delivery, you know, so hopefully we can get back to that, but in the meantime we're always looking to kind of improve our kind of remote offer to our residents, but yeah, nothing really more to add than what I previously said on that.
Moira, have you anything you wanted to add on that question?
I think what we have found is the government is still under obligation to deliver a huge agenda around skills development, and including the adult education budget, the skills development budget for adult education. So they still need to carry on doing that. And I think that there is again a shift in terms of how they're operating, and a lot of that employability, training, development, all the workshops, etc., going online, just as you said, Siobhan. And you know, the access to learners is great, but there are some hurdles that we still have to jump. So that is happening as we're going. So whereas the previous, there was a lot of work being done in classrooms, delivering workshops, and a lot of free courses out there. There's so much free resource out there via the government. That I think one of the hurdles with that, or one of the challenges, is identifying which one to go for. Garry, I'm sure you know, you may have Redbridge have found that, is which training provider to go with, because they're being inundated by all the different training providers in terms of the courses that residents can potentially go for. So I think maybe that needs to be tidied up a little bit going forward, because they're going to be inundated even more.
I agree. There's like a plethora of kind of resources, online webinars, courses, refresher courses, and yeah, I fully agree with you. It's kind of actually weeding them down and seeing what's most suitable for our residents. I mean, I know I'm constantly getting emails, even, you know, my son at secondary school, he's getting bombarded with stuff, you know, remote learning and courses and careers stuff. So yeah, it's kind of definitely kind of establishing what's most beneficial for our residents. I fully agree.
But
it's interesting that point. Yeah, it is. It's interesting that point, Garry, isn't it? Because certainly for some parts of public services in the early days, we were so overwhelmed by offers of help, and actually that wasn't always good because we just needed to have the space to be able to do the stuff that we needed to. So I think that's interesting, but it touches on the fact that actually this has also given communities an opportunity to revitalise and also take control over some of what they actually need in their own context. And I've been on some calls recently with other local government colleagues across the country, and some of them have said this has been really interesting because we do sometimes get in the way. And it's sometimes crisis actually can help that work itself through too. So Moira, to your point, maybe what we need to be thinking about as we move forward is how do we, can we sort of improve local consultation processes and all of the rest of it, so our communities can give us much quicker and much more valuable feedback about what really is helpful to them, rather than us sitting back and saying this is what we're going to commission for you, and you sort of wade your way through this massive, what is incredible resource. But if you've got too much incredible resource, you have to ask, okay, are we actually helping, or are we creating a problem as well?
Yeah, we've been
and sorry, Siobhan, we don't have to actually go far. I mean, we're constant. We have an arm to us which is 3DC learning, where we have tried to. We are not learning providers. We do not deliver training and development, because we're not set up to do that, and two is there are a plethora of organisations out there that are actually delivering fantastic training and development. However, if we can consolidate all those different elements into one portal, if you like, where an organisation, we're forever dealing with housing associations, employment and training teams, or heads of employment and training, or heads of whoever, who are trying to identify the right courses for their residents to go on. And they do need that one point of access, because otherwise they're just sifting through the internet trying to identify a whole load of providers. So that's the biggest hurdle I think we've come across with in relation to social housing. And possibly, I don't know what, Garry, your thoughts are in terms of Redbridge and what I've just said in terms of one portal for that training and development. Would it be easier for organisations to be able to access one area where they would be able to identify and access or research all the different training providers that are available, and what courses they provide and where they provide them? whether those lead
Yeah.
on to whether they take a sectoral approach in terms of that training and development. How does it operate?
Yeah, I think it'd be beneficial if there was a bit of a one-stop shop kind of in terms of like the kind of training offer. I mean, on our website, what we try and do is we try and like look at the offer within the borough, and kind of get quality kind of provision and providers that we kind of know and trust that offer, you know, good training. And you know, like, and that could be like a number of things, including like apprenticeships and kind of further kind of further learning. But yeah, I agree. I think something like that may be beneficial for our residents.
I think that some local govs are doing a really good job of that, actually. I work quite closely with Camden and Westminster. They both have employment and skills network provider meetings on a quarterly basis, and they're all about trying to consolidate the offer. And as an organisation that's trying to add social value, instead of us going in and saying, this is what we'd like to give you, we go in and we say, tell us what you need, how we can support you, how can our skills and resources back up the great work you're already doing. Because we don't want to go in and say, we know more about this than you do, you guys are the experts. But using the resources we have, in particular our supply chain of recruitment experts, it's a really valuable resource, and people really value the opportunity to have an interview with one of these people, a practice interview or whatever. So I think it's about fitting in the stuff that we want to give with the stuff that's already being done.
And that's absolutely the right tactic to take, which is asking the customer what they require as opposed to telling the customer what they require. And the same goes for social value. Ask them what they want.
Yeah, definitely.
So really, you could look at the whole of COVID as a and I have ranted about this on Twitter several times, actually, and copied in several ministers, so I probably will never be working for civil service in the future. But there is something about how little our communities really understand about the way local and central public services are structured and delivered. And I do think, you know, there is a responsibility, isn't there, both for, you know, for all of us in whatever part of public service we pay, but just as citizens, you know, really understanding how things work and why they work helps us work through what there's been so many wonderful things about communities working together and people looking out for each other, but there's also been a lack of patience and a lack of tolerance and an ease to criticise everybody. And sometimes I think that comes through a lack of knowledge. So, you know, you hear about, God, the documents are too big, and, you know, the portal, it might not be easy to access and all of the rest of it. But actually, this stuff impacts our lives. So you can't just get things like this in 3 clicks. And if you are looking for that, then actually you need to adjust your own expectations. These things need time and they need investment. And there is, as Moira said and Garry has said, there is so much incredible stuff available. Maybe we need to start to think about how we access that and think about the time that we spend in doing that as an investment.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we've fired through a lot of the questions in quite well. You've circumvented me needing to ask the questions, which is a good job, panel, because as I say, limits my time talking on here. But I guess to round up on sort of the last question, really, Leighton, if your ears have pricked up, we're on to question number 6. But if you aren't already, or if there's people out there listening who aren't already, sort of how would the panel sort of suggest that other local authorities, public bodies start to work with their partners to deliver better social outcomes, social value outcomes? Siobhan, should I start with you and I'll work through?
Yeah, sure. So the way we always kick off social value with a new local authority customer is we try and have a sit down and find out what their priority areas are, because again, they're the customer, they know what their local people need, and then we come to them with a list of offerings. This is what we think we can do. We call it a social value action plan, and then we sort of monitor it. We relay back to it at quarterly business reviews, and we see this is what we've done so far. Are there any other opportunities, any other things we can get involved in? I think it's just about having those conversations and being willing to give a couple of things a try, because not everything will work on the first go, but finding out what your niche is and what you can really offer that's valuable, and getting that to the residents.
Excellent. Garry, what would your suggestions be?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with what Siobhan's just said. I mean, we did that with Matrix, sat down, had a coffee, and discussed the need of our residents. And we've done it with other organisations. And it's about kind of the learning process as well. So on kind of bigger, say, some of the construction projects that we've worked on, when we first kicked off with social value, one of things didn't work so well that we thought might have done. So we kind of re-looked at that. And I think it's about being kind of flexible, but really knowing the need of, your residents and what they're going to benefit most from, I think.
Thanks, Garry. And Moira?
What can I say? I agree with both of them. The one thing that we have found works quite well with some of our housing association partners is the formation, if we go right down to an operational level, is the formation of a resident steering group or a resident focus group that actually feeds into that gathering of information, in terms of what the customer wants and needs, and to be sitting there right there with us going through things. So that works quite well. But yeah, absolutely reiterating what Siobhan and Garry have just said.
Thanks, Moira, really appreciate it. And Karen, I'll leave you to give us a golden nugget right at the very end.
Okay, no pressure then. So I just want to think about this through the lens of workforce. I think it's to have that conversation internally, actually, about what social value means to our organisations and how does that translate then into what our workforce strategy is. Because actually, if we are doing things to our workforce that actually is delivering something different to what our citizens, what our communities need, there's a disconnect. And that disconnect will always be there. So social value seems to me, it has to be at the heart of our workforce strategies. Otherwise we will, I think we will fail to deliver on the entirety of the opportunity that social value gives us. And certainly that's, our colleagues working in public services get incredibly frustrated and disheartened when they feel that other things get in the way of delivering to our communities. So it's a really simple one for me. Excellent.
And I think that's a really good important point, Karen. Obviously, a lot of people get into public sector work and working for local authorities or other public bodies because of, for a number of reasons, but partly to help serve and be a servant. So if you're limiting the amount of work and good stuff that you can deliver back to your communities, then I guess it kind of takes a little bit away from part of the reason why you want to get involved in that work in the first place, doesn't it? So, thank you everyone for joining us on the panel today. I think that's really useful stuff. I think there's a question here from Nick, or it might just be a comment. It's a very long question, so bear with me. Nick, in future, can you just bullet point us, because my reading skills aren't as quick. So Nick's put, social value will clearly come from a vital support mechanism to local government and communities it serves and supports as we see the evolution of big society model and continue to dwindle in budgets. So it's the future, we will hopefully see the envelope pushed further in terms of private sector's responsibility around this. No, it's a really good point, and I think obviously we from Matrix echo that, and that's kind of why we've kind of tried to develop. We've developed over the last 4 or 5 years to kind of really take responsibility for that. So, excellent. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks again to the panel for joining us. And over to you, Lee, to sum up.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's yet again another really thought-provoking session. And kind of for me tied in with some work we were doing from PPMA yesterday with the OD network across London councils on compassionate leadership, and this need to remember, and I think Garry alluded to this, that currently we're very focused on technology, but there's a big part of our society who are disconnected from this, and it's quite easy to lose sight, be very transactional rather than really remembering this kind of notion and need to be compassionate, and what does that mean in practice. And these two things for me really dovetail very tightly together. paying attention and asking our communities what is it that's important to them, which might be very different for different sectors and also across the country. But we have got amazing examples of activity which has taken place, and some of those have been really well showcased today. So thanks, Chris, as ever, and Matrix for organising. Tom Harrison, sitting in the background there. Tom puts a huge amount of work in to help us with these events, and always hugely supportive, along with Chris. So thank you so much. Great to meet Siobhan, I've not met before. Thank you, Moira and Gary. Great contribution. And of course, the fantastic Karen, our president of PPMA. On Monday, for those of you who are looking to check into our Lunch and Learn session there, we'll be joined by ICANN. And bearing in mind, we've heard a reference to the possibility, people talking about the second wave. They're going to be talking about business continuity and sharing some tips, which might be quite timely for you to take back into the workplace. And also, if you haven't done so already, and you're looking to learn what to do in September, we are open for bookings for our virtual conference on the 15th and 16th of September. All of those details are available on our website. And we have a huge raft of content, which is currently available to all members of PPMA, and some of it's open content. So check out our website and you can see the benefit of joining the PPMA community. And I wish you well for the weekend. Beautiful day here in Shoreham. I'm looking forward to doing some walk down on the beach with Luca. That's my whippet. And I look forward to seeing some of you on Monday. Otherwise, stay safe and well, and sending you love from us all here in PPMA. Thanks for joining, and see you soon.